Hey guys, so this is another one of my Patreon book recommendations, and we're just going to jump right into it today. So this one is a Romanian poet. Um, Definitely don't know how to say his name accurately, but I'm just going to go ahead and guess as Nichita Stanescu. Wheel with a Single Spoke. And this is published by the wonderful Archipelago books. It's kind of faded out, you can't see it. But anyway, you guys probably know it just from the shape and the general format. All their books look like this. Another well-known Romanian writer that this translator, Sean Cotter, publishes with Archipelago books is Mircea Cartarescu, which I'm also probably saying wrong. I have his book over there, Blinding. All right, so yeah, I don't know a whole lot about Romania during the time that this guy lived. So he was born in 1933, which is the same year as Cormac McCarthy, and he died in 1983 when he was 50. So the communists got in power, I think, in 1947 in Romania, and then they stayed in power until after this guy died. So the majority of this guy's life was under the communist control, which unfortunately necessarily included surveillance and extrajudiciary executions and just kind of terrible stuff. And then of course there was censorship, and social realism was forced, and all that stuff you can expect from a satellite country of the USSR. But this guy seemed to be pretty free as far as what he could get away with. Might not be the right way to phrase it, because he didn't have an easy life in that way, but he didn't let his situation confine him mentally. That's what I was trying to say. But yeah, as with many Archipelago books, this had a single printing in 2012, but now, from what I saw, there are only a handful of copies that go for between $25 to $30. It's a handful, like 5 or 6, and then the price steeply rises after that. So if you're interested in this guy, I'd pick him up. Another interesting Romanian Sean Cotter publishing lately is Rakes of the Old Court, and the writer's last name is like Caragale or something like that. I don't know. Romanian escapes me. Haven't quite gotten down anything with the pronunciation, but it's also translated by Sean Cotter. So it was just published August 15th or something like that. So just came out by Northwestern University Press, I believe. So if you're interested in this Romanian Sean Cotter, universe, that's another recommendation. I've heard it's one of the best Romanian modernist novels, so might be interesting. I haven't read it personally, but I am interested in it. All right, back to the matter at hand. So Nichita Stanescu. I think I'm actually only going to read one of his poems to give you an idea of what he's about. And there's an afterword written by Sean Cotter in this translation, and he actually mentions the poem I'm going to read. The story goes that when Sean Cotter was in Romania, he had a friend that gifted him a collection of Stanescu's poetry, and wrote in the beginning of it, am I getting this right? Okay, this is probably right, but don't quote me on it. had a quote of this poem I'm about to read, Enkidu, which you might recognize is from the Epic of Gilgamesh, the wild man from the Epic of Gilgamesh. So Sean Cotter looked into this guy and read that poem, and that's the poem I'm going to read because I think it's one of this guy's best poems, and it's actually from his earlier period. So I'm just going to jump right into it, and that'll be pretty much this video. I'll talk a little bit about the poem, and that'll be it. All right, so this is Enkidu, and when was this published? All right, this was published in 1965, so 1965. This writer was about 30 years old. And then there's a quote from the Epic of Gilgamesh. My friend Enkidu is dead. Together, we killed lions. 1. Look at your hands and rejoice, for they are absurd. And look at your feet in the evening as you stand straight and hang toward the moon. I may be too close for you to see me, but even this is not nothing. I will become distance to fit your eyes, or a word with sounds the size of ants to fit your mouth. Touch your ear and laugh and wonder at your touch. I ache, even in the brief transit. I stretched my gaze until it hit a tree, and there it was. Look at my shoulders and tell yourself they are the strongest you've seen, aside from grass and bison, who are like that for no reason. My shoulders shift distance, like a leather bag pushed by a windmill. This is why, when lights I have not touched burn the backs of my eyes, a gentle blue pain passes above the crown of my head in place of the sky. And if I ache with rivers, rocks, a length of ocean, just enough for everything to be my bed, never enough to fit my thoughts' eternal expansion, oh, then there's no way I'll know how you also ache, and I am not the one to whom I speak. 2. So something would exist between us, maybe me. I baptized what I had done, wounding myself, always making myself smaller, always dying by words from my own lips. And the great pain, I called it blue for no reason, or just because that's how my lips smiled. I ask you whether you, smiling, would call another pain the same. Surely the height I threw away from my sight, like a spear never to return, you caress differently, because your hands, my twins, are absurd, and we should rejoice in these words passing from one mouth to another like an invisible river, for they do not exist. Oh, friend, how is your blue? 3. A game of passes, some fast, some slow, before my eye and with me creating the trees, stones, and river, over my slower body, dragged along by thought, like goats at evening, by a rope. Time alone everywhere, myself, and after that. And that's the quote that Sean Cotter's friend got him. 4. And when everything is erased, like seas inside a shell, there's nothing anymore except in the eyes of those who are not, the passage of pain into the passages of time. Oh, my friend, when I am like someone I will not be, because one thing like another does not exist. What is unique is in pain, measured like eddies in the mountains, the passage of time, knowing it is alone, changing the names of surrounding things. 5. Whatever is not limitless is. It travels everywhere, encountering the wide marks I call time. Whatever is not everywhere is. It swallows my legs up to the knees, beats the elbow of my heart, on my mouth it dances. What is not timeless is the way a memory is. Like the vision of hands, it is, like the hearing of eyes. 6. I die with everything I touch, with rotating stars, with sight, with every shadow I cast over the sand, a little less soul remains. A thought stretches a bit further. I look at everything as though I see death. Only seldom do I forget, and then I create dances and songs from nothing, shrinking myself and pulling out my throbbing temples to turn them into crowns of myrtle. And lastly, we have 7. Come out of the tent, friend, so we can be face to face, can look at each other, be quiet together, always asking whether the other is, and how he senses himself. Game of tumbling with stones, shaken out of somewhere towards somewhere else. Yeah, so I do think there is something very compelling about, a really deep friendship in this way. And this poem kind of plays with the idea that Enkidu in some sense was, or depending on how you read the poem, whether this is about Enkidu or about Gilgamesh. But it seems to me like it's from the perspective of Gilgamesh / the speaker about Enkidu, or a best friend like Enkidu, or a companion like Enkidu. And brings to mind that idea of the ancient Greeks, how a friend or a companion like that is someone who was created with half of your soul in their body, and so you're drawn together inevitably because of that. And I think in a very real way, and I think this poem kind of plays with the idea that really, when you get down to it, nothing actually separates me from you. Especially, of course, whenever you're looking at deep companionship or friendship or anything in that area. It's fake that my consciousness happens to be behind this wall of bone, and then yours happens to be behind the other one. I was actually reading part of the Bhagavad Gita today, and it says something very similar to that, actually. So I think it's an interesting idea that flows through all great literature, basically. But yeah, so I don't know, and I really like that idea of tying back into the oldest stories of Gilgamesh. Of course, Gilgamesh is a ancient Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian tale. It goes back 3,000-4,000 years, and it influenced Homer, and then through Homer influenced basically everything else. Also, I will mention it, but I won't read it out. This guy, Stanescu, has a collection of 11 elegies, and they're really written in an interesting way, and it reminds me very much of Rilke's Duino elegies. The second elegy, I'll just read a little line from it. The second elegy, in the style of the Getes, not sure how to say that, Getes. And this also kind of reminds me of Pessoa in a way. For Vasil Parvan, every rotten tree trunk had a god. If a stone cracked open, fast they put a god in there. All it took was for a bridge to break, and a god went into the gap. Or for the street to have a pothole, and a god went in there. So it's like this, kind of playfulness, and This guy's excellent. I couldn't believe it. I just ran across him kind of randomly. Of course, Sean Cotter struck my attention whenever I saw that he translated from Romanian by Sean Cotter. Unfortunately, this isn't a bilingual edition, but you know, who of us can actually read Romanian anyway, even though it is a Romance language. So, well, anyway, I don't want this video to go on for too much longer, but thanks again for those of you who support my Patreon. It's very generous of you guys. And thanks for bearing with me while I got everything situated with the school. It was definitely more energy consuming than I expected it would be, maybe foolishly so, but anyway, so yeah, thank you. And as always, death is a gang boss.